Hello. I'm going to do my usual introduction. I am Krista, and this is lēmniscāta Live. This is lēmniscāta Live number 6. No, it's number 7. That's wrong. I'm going to have to change it. I think, yeah, this is number 7. I just cut and pasted from the last one. And the title of the topic, I guess, or title for this episode is Collective Mother Guilt, Dignity and Liberty. I don't know, honestly, I kind of struggled or am struggling with this one, so I might just delete it after it's over. But I promise to do a live every day this week, and it's a good discipline for me. You know, there's a threshold of coming up with the topic and then pushing through. So I'm going to do it 5 times this week. Anyway, so I guess what I'm really wanting to, I've written about and thought a lot about guilt, both from the perspective of kind of a resistance to feeling guilt, which I think, you know, can be problematic because it's important to be able to feel guilty. Thanks, James. James, like, you got this. I'm like, yay. Glad someone thinks I do. No, okay. So I've thought about guilt in that respect of resisting it, but also in being resilient enough to also carry it. Like, for example, when you eat meat from an animal, that there's a kind of guilt that you have, that, you know, if you put one foot in front of the other in this world, you're guilty of something, and to not be oblivious to it, but rather to like carry it. And that's the way we excuse me, that's the way that we are able to be in reciprocity, is when we actually can feel our guilt or our debt. And today I'm talking about mother guilt, and I actually like, I dreamt last night that the next 2 topics for these live streams should be mother guilt and birth trauma. So tomorrow I'm going to talk about birth trauma. And it's interesting though, because it was sort of guidance from a dream, but I feel a little murky. So this is going to keep me on track, this idea of dignity and liberty, because the thing about guilt is you feel guilty when you've perpetrated something, right? And you feel hurt when you're the victim. So, or maybe that's not exactly the innocence is actually the opposite of guilt, right? Innocence. So when we're hurt, we're innocent, and when we perpetrate, we're guilty. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this idea of mother guilt, and I think that a lot of the way mother guilt functions culturally, it has a kind of complicated life. So, and anyway, so just recently I came across a meme. Okay, it was yet another meme. So this isn't the first time this happened, but it sort of struck me again. Oh, hey, Melanie. Hi, thanks for coming. It's always nice to have people here. So I appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out and talk and think about this together. I'm really, anytime you want to put something in the comments, if you have a comment or a question about anything I'm saying, please go ahead, feel free, and I'll try to keep an eye. So anyway, so I came across this meme, and it was, I don't know if I can pull it up at this moment, but it was really like, you know that your family is dysfunctional if, and it had this whole list of things, right? It was kind of talking to mothers, or female partners, or I think for the most part, but I think it was mothers. And it was sort of like, all these things are things that, of course, I'm just like, I do all of those things. And some of them, like, one of them was like, it was sort of, I mean, and then I went hunting for these memes because I was like, oh, these make me so upset. Why do they make me so upset? And so I hunted another one. One of them was like, it said children should not be caretakers of other children. And that one just completely smacked to me of sort of this sort of a Western entitled perspective. And not just entitled, that's kind of overused these days, but like a Western disconnected from clan and kin perspective. And also like the kind of perspective that's completely disconnected from the real and valuable labor of mothering, and how, you probably wouldn't say your children shouldn't need to cook ever when they're growing up, or they shouldn't need to have chores or something. But for some reason, they shouldn't have to caretake other children. Anyway, so that was just sort of like, but anyway, I see these memes and I always just feel like crap and I hate them. So I started, so in the Facebook group, the Song Ceremony Sustenance Facebook group, I kind of asked this question, like, how does everyone else feel when you hear this? And it was sort of varied, and some of this comes out of that conversation. Okay, so that's kind of setting up the issue. I mean, I think there's another issue too of individual guilt and collective guilt, and how they function a little bit differently. And kind of okay. So I'm just looking at this. I have some notes and I'm thinking about how the order should be. Okay, so I think I'm going to start out just talking about individual guilt. And one of these things, oh, I saw another one of these memes as I was doing my little meme search. It was like something about, like, I don't know, mothers and yelling at your kids. And, oh, this is going around on Facebook these days. It's like, I've seen it a bunch of times, people posting it. Don't yell at your children tonight. If you yell at your children before bed, then they're going to carry it into their dreams. And if you yell at your children before bed, like this list of all the horrors that you're causing if you yell at your children before bed. And it's interesting, as I look at it, I feel torn, like, because of course, like, I've been yelled at by my mother, and I know, like, that it was hard, and but I also kind of have this resistance to feeling guilty. Okay, so let's look at that, because so this kind of ties into, I'm going to talk about, like, kind of a really taboo reality of mothering, or a really taboo reality of mothering in modernity, modern mothering within the nuclear family, that's disconnected from clan or tribe or community. And that is like explosive rage, like where you may only be slightly like stop, but it's like, and it sort of seems to sometimes bubble up when, like, in random times, like when you wouldn't. I'm just looking at who's here. Patricia. Hey, Patricia. That's my cousin. Okay, so sorry. This rage that just kind of like, it just explodes out of you. You can't control it. It happens. I think one of the times it happens is like nursing mothers at night, getting woken up over and over and over again. after like not sleeping for time, so there's this explosive rage, right? And so here's this meme, and we're like, um, um, because there is like a healthy function of guilt or shame, right? Um, and so I'm trying to like explore this resistance that I have, like, because I tend to be like, no, I really should look at myself, like to be self-examining. But something about these memes just pisses me off, and I just am like, get a little mad. So so the thing is, so if you're angry, you're a perpetrator, right? So I want to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to do a whole thing about victim and perpetrator and stuff in another video that's just about this, um, but for right now, I just want to talk about it a little bit. So victim and perpetrator, like the relationship between them, right? So like the fact is that we're always, all of us, no one is innocent. And if you think you're innocent, that's a problem, because it means you're unconscious and oblivious of your guilt, and you're unable to actually be in reciprocity. So if you just think that you're a wonderful, good in your, then you're not on planet Earth right now. And if you feel guilty all the time, that's another problem, because you have to be able to be in reciprocity. Like the thing about being guilty all the time, or the one who other people are always indebted to, it can be a way of exercising power. Because if I'm always caretaking and I'm always giving, then I actually when you're in debt to someone, I mean, at least I do, I just feel like, oh my gosh, I want to get that paid off, blah, blah, blah. But if you refuse to ever take generosity, you're actually keeping yourself in a power over position relative to someone else, or in general. And so, so it's really important to be able to be both of these things. So I guess I just want to say, like, I'm not saying here that as mothers, we should never own our guilt, because it's really important to be both. Hey, Rebecca, thanks for the heart. Appreciate it. So, so what I'm talking about here is something a little bit different, right? Let's see if I can get to it this way. It might just be a total write-off. I don't know. But so if we have this explosive rage, then we're supposedly the perpetrator, right? And there's this little piece in Chinese medicine that I have carried with me for many years, like 20 or more. And it's because I studied Zen Shiatsu when I was, whatever, late 20s or something. And one of the things that the sensei said when we were learning about because you do shiatsu, you learn all the meridians and the relationship between the 5 elements of Chinese medicine. And one thing he said was that the mother of anger is grief. And I don't know, I guess maybe because anger is such a taboo topic or a taboo feeling in our culture, and also maybe part of trying to not feel it or something, or trying to understand it. I think about this a lot, that the mother of anger is grief. And so it's sort of like, what is the mother of something? It's the source, it's the creative root. So, and this is like just another way to understand and kind of have compassion, I guess, for a perpetrator. But okay, so the perpetrator, and one thing we were talking about in the group was about this idea, or this, like, of how, like, what is needed in order to actually be guilty sometimes. And it kind of came from, I think, first, acknowledging that simple, like, oh, I yelled at my kids, and simply being like, I'm guilty, is kind of, it's not super helpful if you don't look at the context as well. And I was talking about this teacher of mine, Ray Castellino, I heard him, he was giving a talk, and he talked about how every mother needs 7 layers of support in order to be her best self as a mother. And so if we look at it this way, we're sort of looking at it systemically, and like how can like, of course I'm yelling at my kids. I'm exhausted. I'm not sleeping. I'm hardly eating. I'm alone with this baby. I wasn't expected to care for my siblings, so I don't know how to do it. Um, and I guess what I'm wanting to sort of, how I'm wanting to move with this is that, so what if we had these layers of support, then we would be able to, I think, hold our guilt as well in this moment. But just asking a woman who has no support to just take on the guilt of, I'm going to say the F word, of effing yelling at her children, and just asking her to stop with this like sort of tactic of like, you're going to ruin them, you're going to hurt them if you yell at them before bed. I just am like, it's not that it's wrong, it's just that it's incomplete, and it's not very helpful to most women who find themselves yelling at their children. It just doesn't, it is not a remedy. If anything, it's going to drive women deeper into the behavior. So instead, thinking about what are the layers of support that we need to have for ourselves and to offer for each other, so that we can actually to be held in our guilt. Okay, and this is sort of like, I guess I want to kind of relate this also to this restoration of birth and mothering practices and ceremonies, and what I was talking about yesterday with coming of age ceremonies, in that it's related, and I'm spacing out what I was going to say. It'll come back to me, or it often comes back to me. But so if we had these layers of support, then we might actually be able to deal with this rage and our guilt. And what I'm gonna, so then I'm gonna segue a little bit again to this this book. When I was first, when my daughter, she's turning 14, in her first probably year of life, excuse me, I came across this book. The library, like the Goodwill, I don't know. It wasn't recommended to me. I just kind of found it and started reading it. It was called If Only I Were a Better Mother, and it was by Melissa Gale West. And she, I think, is from Seattle. Anyway, this book, it was so interesting to me because she was talking about mother guilt and about how, I wish I were a better mother, and like how, and she sort of offered this particular remedy. I can't remember much about the book. I should pick it up and read it. But for this kind of gripping perfectionism as a response to feeling guilty or feeling scared, right, about the well-being of your children, because we don't want to ruin our children. For the most part, mothers do not want to ruin and traumatize their children. I hate saying that, because we really do need to traumatize our children. We need to accustom them to hardship. They need to build resilience, right? But we don't want to hurt them permanently. Anyway, so her remedy was, and she talked about her experience with it. She said that what she did was she took a weekend away and left her baby with someone else, probably the papa. And she went to this little cabin in the woods, and she just conjured up all the horrors that she could imagine that could befall her child. Yeah, either inflicted by her or inflicted, or just, random, just tragic, accidental stuff. And she said, and so I grieved. She's like, I cried the whole weekend. And I just, and because grief is a companion of mine, and I think the first time that I felt really reflected back about grief being a powerful medicine was by David White, in this therapist actually gave me this cassette tape of his audio lecture called The Poetry of Self-Compassion. I probably listened to that 1,000 times. And he talks about grief and about how important grief is. So I know it's coming in vogue again, which is a good, I mean, hopefully it doesn't, sometimes when things come in vogue, if something's in vogue, it's often been co-opted and prepped for consumption rather than healing. So be careful. Anyway, okay. So I actually did it. I couldn't get away from my child for a whole weekend and go to a cabin in the woods, but I was able to like ask my husband and papa of my baby via to go away and like give me, so I took the day. I don't think I even took overnight, and I just went into my room and I went into my bed, because especially those early days, like, are they breathing, are they going in checking on them, and like you're tiptoeing and all, like, just it was just this huge range, right, of all the ways that I could damage, that I was starting out on this journey where I was pretty much destined to damage this child, and like wanting to, like, gripping kind of feeling like I just, and this sort of gripping perfectionism. And it was just like, it didn't feel good because I was always scared. So I tried it, and I literally imagined them dying. I imagined me hurting them. I imagined like all of the possible things that could go wrong. And it's really like, I mean, it's just so raw, especially when they're little babies, because they're so vulnerable. It was really easy to tap into then. Anyway, and so I wept. I just grieved for all day. And it did help. Okay, so now I want to go, see, I'm sort of tracing my, now I want to go back down here. You can't see it, of course, but like down to this Chinese medicine principle in the 5 elements, that the mother of anger is grief. And how grieving, like letting myself go into this grieving, I mean, it felt horrible. And I mean, and also there's a lot of kind of advice out there that would say, kind of the manifestation-y type stuff, where it's like, never imagine anything bad happening, you'll bring it on yourself. But what I was really doing was grieving the reality of embodiment, that it's tragic, that it's full of tragedy all over the place. I mean, true stories, and kind of how the world is now. Just, so I grieved. Ultimately I was grieving for like the reality of being a mother, is that, I'd gone from being completely invulnerable and kind of probably suicidal half the time, to like being totally vulnerable because I was so rawly in love with this being that was so vulnerable. So the grieving, it helped me feel better. And so I guess what I'm trying to show here is how grief, and the allowing of grief, what kind of happens is that we get to the root, and that kind of has to do with this lack of support that we have, or this reality that we're in, that we kind of shift from being the perpetrator of, like potentially the perpetrator enraging, to being the victim. In that, let's see, I just feel like that's not really following. Does that make sense? Like, who's here still? Is that making sense? I feel like I'm trying to, like, if someone could ask a question, or like, I'm not sure if I'm totally getting this across, but like, if we go back to the explosive rage, right? And if I were, in the time, if I can like actually like step back and like get to like what it is, because often it just sort of wells up from nowhere, but I actually get in touch with where it's coming from. It is about like, I'm exhausted. I'm at the end. I have no more energy to give. I'm just like, I might die if I have to, like, there's just no support. So it goes back to this layers of not having the layers of support. And that mothers don't have layers of support is a perpetration against them. I mean, I hate to like just say, you know, women then that rage, that perpetration has its roots in being victims of patriarchy. Okay, that maybe is a summary, but like, and sort of circling back to this, you know, all of the labor that we do. What was it like? I don't know. I was listening to someone. I'm not even going to say who. I'm afraid of being judged, but so I listen all over the spectrum, on the right, on the left. I'm really interested in the cultural war zones and how their polarizations and how to kind of, so like seeing all different sides helps me. So, but I think I'm not even, you know, I mean, I don't go as far as white supremacists. I need more support to do that. But this person was talking about, and it was kind of a good point. I was like, that's like a decent point. It's like, like the pay gap. The pay gap between men and women is there not because women just get paid less. It's that they're not dumb enough to work 80 hours a week, to work the 80 hours a week that it requires to be a CEO and blah, blah, blah. Like they have children, in that if they want to be with their children, then, which, this person was saying, it's kind of sane to want to do that, like kind of acknowledging women. So that's why there's the pay gap, just because women aren't stupid enough to like think that matters that much. And I was like, well, I get it. Like, it's kind of like even throwing a little accolade to women, but what he didn't get is that women, they leave the paid workforce, right? But they're still doing labor. That's very important. It's not just undervalued labor, because if you're a nanny, that's not a high paying profession, right? Okay, we know that, right? So it's undervalued, but women do it. It's not even paid at all if you're taking care of your own child. So the root of the pay gap actually goes back to a whole lot of labor just being invisibilized. I mean, it's hard for us to even think of that as labor. Like, it's like, well, that's just, but why is that not considered labor? Anyway, so that reality that like everything we're doing is invisible is infuriating. And I don't mean, it is infuriating in itself, the fact, but it creates rage in mothers. So then that kind of brings us around to collective mother guilt. And the problem I see in shaming women instead of holding them in their rage, and instead of actually my mind wandered there. Okay, so yeah, so it's like in the other side of my mind, I'm like, but sometimes it's really important for people to feel guilty. So I don't want to say that we shouldn't ever. I think that okay, yeah, it's getting into the other thing. Okay, so yeah, so I'm going to say this strongly now. Shaming mothers because of their rage or whatever number of things is actually perpetuating the problem. And it's actually quite cruel. and adds, it basically takes away support. And I was thinking about this in terms of yesterday's conversation around cultural appropriation. And I think that that's partly what I'm trying to do, is to not just point fingers and say, that's appropriation, but rather to, sorry, I want to read Rebecca's comment in just a second. Oh my gosh, now I'm totally lost my train of thought. Oh, like I'm trying to hold a space where we can actually be in our guilt around appropriation. Okay. And by layers of support, then it can actually, we can sort of feel into that, like flips back into a victim place. So this is like, again, it's another polarity. It's not just black or white. Anyway, I want to go, okay, so Rebecca is saying, I am totally following. Grief is the mother of anger. She says, interestingly, before I learned how to grieve, I was so angry at my baby and myself and the world and the perpetration against mothers under patriarchy. We shame mothers for their rage because we maybe don't know how to grieve with them. Yeah, exactly. It's funny, like just the other day, I had this, it's like a tricky thing, right? If I'm making an offering, like I do myth mending sessions with people, and I offer this healing paradigm that is quite powerful, and blah blah blah, and I get to, when I can afford it, have that layer of support in my life, and even just knowing that I have it, something that actually works, because so much of that stuff out there doesn't work for healing. It just is a waste of time and money. But no, but if I, oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting what I'm saying again. I guess, oh yeah, I know what I'm just going to say. It's like, but there's a way in which, if you're a practitioner or a teacher or a mentor, that people expect you to grieve in a way that isn't actually horrible, that isn't actually like truly gut-wrenching, because somehow people are still hoping for a way out of grief. But we don't understand, and I was talking about like dignity and liberty, and that they say in constellation work that the dignity of the perpetrator lies in their guilt, and this other side I'm kind of making up, but that the liberty of or say the innocence of the victim, and I would say I'm going to say the liberty of the victim lies, because it's not, it lies in their like giving back, like the giving back the thing to the perpetrator. So what if these memes were able to actually just, because there is something powerful, if you can just say what is, then someone can actually hold their guilt, because it comes with like a container and a holding. And let's see if I can, off the top of my head, come up with an example. Like, okay, let's just, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this on the spot. I haven't prepared it. But like, for example, if like that meme about yelling at your children said instead, like, something like, well, I guess naming rage, and I don't know, maybe something like, the rage that you direct to your children actually needs to be given back to where it really comes from. it would be more nuanced, like whatever's at root of that rage that is moving toward your children, it needs to go, you need to give back, you need to speak it back to where it came from, which would be, I mean, when we say patriarchy, it's kind of, it gets a little bit like, well, how are you supposed to talk back to patriarchy, right? But it might be a particular ancestor, it might be a parent, it might be, and this is all the stuff that comes up in the one-on-one session work and myth mending. This is the kind of thing that happens, that we do. I don't know, maybe I feel like if I saw, I'm going to work on that and see if I can come up with a meme that would make sense. And I'm open to like other people, but like to offer, you want to offer the truth, you want to truth tell, but you don't want to, thanks for the hearts. I love it when the hearts come. To truth tell, which is different than telling the truth. Like, you shouldn't yell at your children is like, I don't know. I want to do a whole thing on this about the difference between truth telling versus telling the truth and how really different those things are culturally, as cultural practices and obligations. But okay, so yeah, so I think it's kind of complicated, and I'm sort of working it out. Because on the one hand, I don't want to just be like, because there's kind of like, I don't want to be like, fuck you, mother guilt, like I'm not guilty, and then just scream at my children all the time. Like, that's not what I'm saying, right? But there's also a way in, there's a blog post, and I'll put it in the comments that I wrote. I'll do it right now. That is called, it's about mother guilt. And I was reading it because I was like, oh, I should look at this post before I, and it was written a long time ago, and it was kind, and it's, I was like, oh, is that gonna like, I mean, it does, it calls to grief. It calls mothers to grief, or it's called Goodbye Mother Guilt. And so it does come to the same place, but I'm not wanting, so I need to, but in the way, there was a way in part of it, I was like, I had to say, fuck you to the memes, to this telling the truth crap. So I could get to truth telling, which was the mother of this is grief. And the mother of this is that we do not have support. And the mother of this is something, my disconnection from so much. And then I can start building, and that is going to help me have something strong with my children. And the fact is that there is this other piece of accustom your children to hardship and trauma as medicine, that we need trauma to be resilient. And that's most of the ceremonies like that are very powerful, have something hard in them. So yesterday I was talking about that, like, and I was talking about some things about coming of age ceremonies with my daughter, and there's something she's just like, oh, like, like, no way I'm not getting a tattoo. No, I'm not going to run. No, whatever the thing is that, like, it's not about like making everything trauma free. And that's, I guess, what that article is kind of about. And I was wanting to dig in a little bit more into like this collective mother guilt and sort of the and how we start doing it to each other in terms of like, I think a lot of the parenting coaching stuff is, like, I just kind of get inside when I see the like peace, be peaceful, and I was just like, well, like, peace is great, but there's lots to be, and sometimes it's appropriate to be angry. And there's this wonderful Sabonfu Some. She talks about this ceremony for marriage ceremony, not for wedding, like becoming married, but for like purging difficulty. And so basically the whole community is surrounding the couple, and they draw a line. I think I may be misremembering, I'm sorry. I acknowledge that I may be paraphrasing, but that there's a circle, and that the husband and wife come into the middle. There's no like, children aren't allowed, this crap of like, it might damage them. So this is another thing, like this, it's important for children to see trauma and to see it resolved. Like, that's something I talk about in the article. It's like, I fight with my husband in front of my kid. This idea that you should just like go fight somewhere else, and then the kids think they have no idea how to handle conflict. Okay, anyway, the ceremony, and then the husband and the wife, they yell at each other and they tell each other everything that they hate about each other. And the rule is they have to keep doing that within the circle of community until both come to tears. So repressing your anger is not going to get you there. And that's what we need. So I'm going to end it on that. I think I made it through day 3, 2 more. Whew. So I'll see you tomorrow and the next day with 2 more. I just want to remind you, I have the links in I'm part of this 5-day marathon of live streams, is to get through some stuff in preparation for initiating this lēmniscāta mystery school for mamas, where we really delve into more of this stuff at various different levels. And I think I'm going to be opening that program soon, in the next few days. So if you want to get on the wait list for that, to hear about it, go to the link, lēmniscāta, right there, Mystery School for Mamas. And then right below, there's also a Facebook group that you can join that's free. And that's kind of, I have like 4 tiers of different ways to work with me and participate in this work. And I'll be telling you all about that in a few days. So maybe on Friday even, maybe. So yeah, so please click on there and join me in those calls about that. So yes, so mother guilt, collective mother guilt, and how this collective, we end up just perpetuating the same thing by not coming into grief, and by expecting our leaders and our teachers and our mentors to carry themselves with this sort of weird poise. I mean, I think Brene Brown is like kind of doing this work with her vulnerability stuff, but like, I mean, at the same time, she's kind of pretty put together. I don't want to diss her, but like, there is still, I think, a limit to like what you can present, and a pressure. I feel it. So yeah, again, it's like, so grief is an important piece. The mother of anger is grief. Mwah. See you soon. If I can get it to listen to me.